You are listening to Book Clips, a mini podcast in which authors or narrators do readings from novels. Check out the show notes for the synopsis and buy links for this book.
Hi, I'm Cheyenne Blue, and I'm here today to read from my brand new novel, A Heart This Big. I'm going to start at chapter 1. Nina set down the wheelbarrow, rotated her tight shoulders, and indulged in a moment of pleasure watching her daughter. Phoebe walked alongside Mr. Petey, holding the grey pony's lead rein close to the bit as she had been taught. Mr. Petey plodded docilely around the paddock, ears flicking back and forth as he listened to Phoebe's voice. Mr. Petey's rider, Billy, clutched the saddle with both hands. His red T-shirt was a little too small and showed a strip of chunky tummy between it and his pants. "Try and sit a little straighter, Billy," Phoebe's clear voice floated back to Nina. "Mr. Petey will be more comfortable if you do." Billy jerked to attention like a soldier, making Nina smile. "Phoebe's good with the little kids. You wouldn't think she's only 12 herself." Stella stood next to Nina. Straw stuck out of her wispy hair, but her hands were as clean as ever, her nails manicured. "Yes, she is." Nina allowed herself a moment of pride before turning back to the wheelbarrow. Stella, however, continued to watch her son, her work apparently forgotten. Nina sighed. If only Stella would show the same commitment Phoebe did. "Can you take that wheelbarrow to the muck heap and empty it, Stell?" Stella wrinkled her nose. I don't know." Her gaze went back to Billy, who was now urging Phoebe to let him trot. "Remember, I showed you how last time." Nina managed a reassuring smile for Stella before she turned and marched off to the barn. Exactly how had Stella thought she could help at Banksia Farm when they struck the deal? She was scared of the animals and attempted any physical chore in a very half-hearted manner. Nina sighed. Billy and his obvious love for the animals had won her over, and Stella was part of that package. Stella trailed behind her. "What do you want me to do?" Nina shot a glance at the still unemptied wheelbarrow and quashed her short reply. If Banksia Farm was to gain anything from Stella's assistance, Nina had to come up with something Stella was able to do. The dollars she could have received if a paying child had Billy's place in the Barn Kids program flashed through her mind, but she pushed the thought aside. No, she would always make room for the Billies of the world, even if their parents couldn't pay or were useless around the farm. She grabbed the pony's hay nets and stuffed them with more force than necessary. Stella stood in the doorway, twirling a strand of hair around her finger. "I've been thinking," Nina summoned a smile. "How about I show you what's involved in manning the farm shop? It's a pleasant task. You just have to sell the farm produce to visitors." "Would I be by myself?" "Not at first. I'll show you what you need to do, but once you're confident, I'll leave you to it." "I don't think I'll be very good at that. I'm not that good at talking to people." "Why don't you give it a go at least?" Even in her own ears, Nina's voice sounded artificially encouraging. "Most of the volunteers love working there." "I'd rather not, if you don't mind." Stella came further into the barn. Nina saw the flash of apprehension in Stella's blue eyes and quashed a snappy reply. It was hard for Stella as a single parent. She always seemed so diffident, so lacking in confidence. That was another reason Nina had agreed to take Billy into Barn Kids. Maybe being around Banksia Farm would benefit Stella too. No worries then. You don't have to do anything you're not comfortable with. She was running out of options for Stella though. She handed her the hay nets. "Can you hang these in Mr. Petey's and Jelly Bean's stalls? Remember the knot I showed you? Use that." "I think so." Stella took the hay nets and wandered off. Nina heaved a sigh of relief. Hopefully, Stella would hang the nets correctly. She would have to check later. She strode back to the ignored wheelbarrow and pushed it to the muck heap. With economical movements, she forked the soiled straw and manure onto the top of the heap. Luckily, it was a quiet day at Banksia Farm. Most of the regular barn kids were at school, but Phoebe and Billy's school had a kid-free day. There was no sign of Stella. Nina walked down the barn until she caught sight of Stella's bright cotton frock in Jelly's box. Stella was wiping something from her sandal, the unsuitable open-toed sandals Nina had told her not to wear. and the hay net sat lopsidedly on the floor. Without a word, Nina went in and hung it up. "I've trodden in something that smells bad." Stella balanced on one leg as she inspected the bottom of the other sandal. "Where can I wipe it?" "On the straw." Nina's voice was as pleasant and even as she could make it. "Really?" Stella overbalanced and her foot went down in the straw. "Oh no, I trod in something again." Nina clenched her jaw so hard her teeth ached. The door of the barn crashed open. "Mum, where are you?" Footsteps thudded on the concrete. "Mum!" Phoebe's voice cracked with panic. "I'm here, Phoebe. Where's the fire?" Nina's pulse raced with a mother's concern, and she stepped out of Jelly's stall. Phoebe skidded to a stop. Her eyes were wide and her complexion was unnaturally sallow. "What's happened?" Nina's gaze darted over her daughter from head to toe. Blood? Was there blood? Nothing obvious. But what then? She gripped Phoebe's shoulders, willing some words out of her. "Billy fell off. I think he's hurt his arm. And he's talking funny." "Oh, shit." Nina shot a glance at Stella, and she struggled to keep her voice calm. "You did good fetching me, Phoebe. Where's Billy now?" "Sitting on the ground in the paddock. He says he wants rissoles for dinner, and Superman is riding Mr. Petey to the airport." Phoebe's voice was husky, as if with unshed tears. Worry jumped in Nina's stomach. "Let's go see." Stella and Phoebe had to jog to keep up with Nina's swift steps. "Billy often talks nonsense," Stella said. "I'm sure he's fine." Nina shot her a glance. Stella was no helicopter parent, but her airy unconcern seemed a little callous. Nina's glance swept around the paddock. Mr. Petey grazed on the far side by the road. His reins trailed to the ground. Her gaze snapped to Billy. He sat hunched over, and one hand held the other arm. What 7-year-old ever stayed still like that unless he had to? Unless he's badly hurt. Nina swallowed hard against the panic that bubbled in her throat. "Fee, catch Mr. Petey and put him in the barn. Then fetch one of the pony rugs and come back as fast as you can." Fee nodded and went off at a run. Nina hurried over to Billy and crouched. "Hey, mate, what's the matter?" Billy gazed up at her, his eyes unfocused. "I fell out of the sky. My arm hurts." "Can I have a look?" Nina forced a smile. Billy shook his head. "Nah." Stella crouched too, and gently brushed Billy's hair from his forehead underneath the riding helmet. "Can Mummy look?" Billy nodded and bit his lip. When Stella lifted Billy's hand from his bad arm, it was bent in a way that no normal arm should be. "Oh," Stella said, her voice small. She jerked back. Nina glanced at her. Stella was milky white and washed out. She didn't want 2 casualties on her hands. She fought down a wave of queasiness. Focus. Was Billy's broken arm the only injury? What should she check? Another deep breath steadied her, and her first aid training jumped back into her head. "Billy, do you know where you are?" "I'm at the farm. Mr. Petey and I were flying really high. Then a cloud fell on us, and Superman said Mr. Petey had to take him home. Superman pushed me off." He pointed upward. "Why is the sky green?" Nina met Stella's eyes over Billy's head. He was an unusual kid with a vivid imagination, but this was weird talk even from him. "Sweet baby Jesus, please not a head injury." Nina peered into Billy's eyes. What was she looking for? Think. Her pupils, that was it. She glanced from one to the other. They looked to be the same size, but it was hard to be sure. "Did you hit your head?" "My head hurts," Billy whimpered and leant back into Stella's arms. That was enough. A broken arm was one thing, but a head injury could be serious, particularly in a child. Nina stood, fished her phone from her pocket, and glanced at Stella, who had regained her colour but still looked fragile and unsure. "Stell, we need to call for an ambulance. I'm going to step over here to make the call, okay?" Stella stared at her for a minute, Then her hunched position unfurled. I'll stay with my kid. Nina nodded and smiled at Billy. I'll be back in a moment, Billy the kid. Fee's gone to get you one of Mr. Petey's rugs to keep you warm. She stepped back a couple of paces away and faced Billy while she lifted the phone to her ear. Stella sat on the ground, cradling him to her chest and singing softly. The 000 operator was calm and efficient, and after the initial questions said an ambulance was on its way. Ask him some basic questions, the operator said. Keep him talking. Nina returned to Billy's side and crouched. So, my little mate, what's your name? Billy looked up at her. Tears sparkled in his eyes and tracked moisture down his dusty cheeks. William Robert Placido Moran, and I live at 52 Lorikeet Close, Linville, Sydney, New South Wales, Australia, the world, the universe. Spot on. Nina smiled at him. How old are you? I'm 7 years, 1 month and 11 days. My mummy's 34 years, 5 months and 15 days. Where's Mr. Petey? Did you hear that? Nina said into the phone. Billy doesn't normally slur like that. To Billy she said, Mr. Petey's gone home for his dinner. Phoebe returned at a jog, a horse rug in her arms. Nina draped it around Billy, careful to avoid the broken arm. Is there any blood or clear fluid in his ears? The operator asked. Nina shifted to look carefully. Not that I can see. Should I remove his helmet? No, leave it. The ETA for the ambulance is 4 minutes. Keep talking to him and watch in case he falls unconscious. How are you, Stella? Okay. Stella tightened her arms around Billy's chest. I'll be better when Billy is. Billy whimpered. Stop squeezing me, Mummy, it hurts. Stella loosened her grip. Sorry, sweetie. Mummy's just looking after you. A mother protecting her young. Nina swallowed down the worry. Hopefully Billy only had a broken arm and a minor concussion, and nothing worse. But what did she know? Nina peered into Billy's eyes again, searching for any change. He stared back at her, his blonde hair flattened on his forehead underneath the helmet. His blue eyes were wide and apprehensive. The ambulance should be here with you in 3 minutes, the operator said. Is there someone who can stand on the road and flag it down? Of course, she should have thought of that. Fee, run to the end of the drive and wave at the ambos when you see them. Leave the gates open on your way so they can drive straight through. Fee nodded and then took off at a run, her skinny limbs flying over the rough ground. You want to ride in a big white ambulance, Billy? Stella said into his ear. Will the lights flash? Will it make the woo-woo noise? I'm sure it will, just for you. Good. Billy's voice slurred. Sirens sounded in the distance. Hear that, Billy? Stella said. They turn them on for you. Billy gave a weak grin. His eyelids fluttered. The sirens stopped. A minute later, the ambulance bounced its way across the rough grass. Phoebe ran behind and came to stand next to Nina. Nina glanced at her. This was scary enough for her. How was Phoebe managing? Her daughter's lower lip trembled, and tears sparkled on her eyelashes. Nina squeezed her hand. Billy will be okay. Please let that be true. 2 paramedics exited the ambulance. One crouched next to Billy. Hey, big fella, what happened to you? I fell off Mr. Petey. I think his wings stopped working. Well, that's not good. My name's Brett. What's yours? William Robert Placido Moran. I feel sick. Billy wriggled out of Stella's arms and emptied his breakfast over Brett's shiny boots. Brett didn't budge. Let's take a look at you, William Moran. His colleague opened the back of the ambulance and wheeled out the trolley. We'll take him to the university hospital, she said to Stella. Will you ride along? Stella struggled to her feet, brushing grass seeds from her dress. Yes, of course. Nina stood to one side as the female paramedic asked questions of Stella. Concern for Billy welled up once more, and her guts twisted. What if it had been Fee who sat pale and sick, clutching a broken arm and spouting nonsense? She'd have been beside herself with anxiety. Stella, for all her vagueness, was handling this well, maybe better than Nina would have if it were her kid. In no time, Billy was loaded, and Stella climbed into the back alongside him. "I'll call you later," Nina called. "See how he's doing." Stella nodded. The ambulance crawled down the paddock to the gate and out onto the road. Nina blew out a deep breath. Billy was now in the best hands. She forced a smile. "Why don't you and I have a long drink of lemonade after all that? We can call Stella later to see how Billy is." A tear slipped down Phoebe's cheek. "Will he be okay? Will he?" Nina wrapped one arm around her. "I'm sure he will be, sweetie. Broken bones heal quickly when you're little like Billy." Phoebe's shoulders hunched, and she pushed away from Nina's side. "Was it my fault?" "No, definitely not. It was an accident, that's all. It wasn't Mr. Petey's fault either." "I'll go and pour the lemonade." Phoebe turned away and walked towards the house. Nina took a pace after her, and her glance fell on the still open gate. She jogged across to close it. A car door slammed nearby. When Nina turned, she tightened her lips, and a spark of anger ignited in her belly. Just what she needed. John Wakefield's dapper grey suit was as immaculately pressed as if he'd just picked it up from the dry cleaners, which he probably had. He approached her, detouring around the rutted dirt. His gaze followed the ambulance speeding along the road. The sirens came on in a blaze of sound, probably at Billy's request. "Trouble in paradise?" He switched his gaze to her face. "No." Her smile stretched her lips in an insincere grimace. "It looks like there is. An ambulance leaving here in a hurry?" She shrugged. "Everything's fine, just a routine precaution." Oh, how she hoped those words were true. Billy would be fine. Kids fell off ponies all the time. Kids bounced. They didn't break. Except for Billy's arm. Hopefully not his head. "I'm glad to hear it." He brushed imaginary dirt from the arm of his suit. "I wonder if you've had a chance to consider my offer, Ms. Pellegrini." She clenched her jaw. "Did he never give up?" "I have. The answer's no, just as it was to your previous offer and the one before that." "I think you'll find it's a generous one." "Do the research." "I don't need to. The answer's still no." The ambulance was nearly out of sight, sweeping up the main road towards the hospital. The lights and sirens were still on. Billy must be enjoying the ride. "Going to the university hospital?" Wakefield said. "Nothing serious, I hope?" "No. Horses are dangerous brutes." "Not mine." Still, he shrugged. "A lot of overheads on a big place like this. I hope you're well insured." Nina moved back through the gate and closed it. It was a flimsy barrier at best between them, but the solidity and permanence of her land under her feet gave her confidence. She lifted her chin. "You're wasting your time, Mr. Wakefield. Please do not come again." He rested a hand on the gate with studied casualness. 2,300,000. I think you'll find it's more than generous. You could do a lot with that. A fine education for your daughter. A lovely modern house to live in." "The answer's no. It will always be no. I'm not selling." For a moment longer his cool grey eyes studied her. Nina lifted her chin and met his stare until he turned away. "Don't lose my business card. You may need it." The arrogant bastard. Nina gripped the gate with both hands. Nothing could make her sell Banksia Farm. Nothing. And that was me, Cheyenne Blue, reading Chapter 1 from A Heart This Big.
You have been listening to Book Clips. Check out the show notes for the synopsis and buy links for this book. If you are interested in showcasing your novel, then check out the show notes for more information.